What is up, everybody? Long time no see. I am Matt Burkett, your host of the very first episode of Monstrosities Cast Off. And I am joined here by the one and only
Mr. Andres Perez, aka Kaiju Noir.
And today is a awesome way just to kick things off. I hope you guys know about this, but just a couple weeks ago, the amazing book Godzilla the First 70 Years was actually released. It's available right now on Amazon. Over 400 pages. This thing could be used to as a murder weapon, but it is filled with knowledge. It's an absolutely wonderful tome. And I've been able to dig through it these past couple weeks, and so is Andres. And we are lucky enough to have the two men who are behind this incredible work, the ones and onlys, Mr. Ed Godzishewski and Steve Ryfle. How's it going, man?
How are you, Matt? How are you, Andres? Nice to see you.
Doing fantastic.
Doing fantastic. I hear that you guys actually had a pretty great weekend. You were at San Diego Comic-Con, were you not?
Yeah, yes, we were. Yeah, it was a hell of a time. We had a great time. We killed it. I hate to put it that way, but I think we killed it, and the people who supported us killed it. We had, we were really only there one day. I mean, out of the whole convention. Have you two been to Comic-Con in recent years?
Never been.
Let's see. I want to say like the last I remember I used to go during high school and my early days of college. Probably the last time I went was most likely around 2015, but it was always a great time, especially since San Diego is my hometown. So it was only just like a trolley ride away from me. It was just like a great, huge, bustling area downtown. And just I'm really glad you guys had a wonderful time down there.
Well, I hadn't been in a number of years. I used to go both as a journalist and just as a private, citizen enthusiast. My wife and I would go for many years in a row. And then my attendance sort of tapered off. I think the last time I was there was about 5 years earlier, pre-COVID, right before COVID. This thing is insane, man. I mean, it's just the number. It's like, I used to say it's like a city descends upon a city. Now it's like 5 cities descend upon a city. There's so many people there. It's. I mean, for someone like me, it's claustrophobic. But even not only within the convention, on the convention floor, but Ed and I took a walk because I like to go for a walk. So we had an hour to kill or something. I said, let's go down to the gas lamp corridor, which is across the street. And usually you used to be able to take a walk and go get something to eat or a cup of coffee or whatever. It was insane out there. I kept using the word insane all day that we were there. It's just the number of people in and around that area is just off the hook. And and the other thing was that the Godzilla presence at Comic-Con in 2025 is unprecedented. I mean, there was so much Godzilla merchandise, Godzilla awareness and presence, and so we were lucky to be part of it, and we just had a great time.
Yeah, it was really kind of overwhelming. I've been to Wonder Festival in Japan numerous times, and if anybody's been there before, you know how huge Wonder Festival is, and that probably attendance-wise might be comparable, but San Diego was way more overwhelming than Wonder Festival ever has been, just because I think it's just the way it's. Wonder Festival is kind of spread out, and everybody's just got tables, whereas at San Diego, they have tables and you have cabinets and things that are built up on top of that, so it really feels like you're more like hemmed in by everything. A lot of booths that go 10, 20 feet high, so the impression is completely different. So when you're in there with all those the incredible crush of people, and you're kind of like hemmed in by all these displays that people have, it really got to be almost too much.
I will say, so I mentioned like the Godzilla presence was really unprecedented as far as what I could tell. didn't have a chance to experience everything that was going on with the Godzilla presence. We did visit the Bandai display and booth. I did go over to IDW and talk to some people there about the titles that they're publishing. There were off-site things going on, as you probably know, that were really exciting. We didn't have a chance to do that because we had our own commitments. We had to sign books. We were Abrams, our publisher of Godzilla for 70 years. So the book that we're here to talk about was Abrams had a booth or a section on the floor next to all the other comic book, and there's kind of like a publisher's alley at Comic-Con, as you probably know. And they were part of that, so they had our book there. And when we got there, we signed books at the Abrams table, which was really fun to be in all her books on the floor of Comic-Con. That was kind of neat. It was sort of impromptu. But then they had, scheduled a panel with us later in the day. Then that was moderated by Aaron Gregory of Toho. He's the Godzilla product development manager, which was really great to have him on board with us. And the whole thing was kind of like a way to showcase the new book and talk about it. And then they scheduled, there's the big autograph pavilion in the middle of the two buildings. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of outdoors, but it's covered. And they had scheduled an autograph session for us from, was it 5:30 to, the panel was from 4 to 5, and then this is Saturday, and then 5:30 to 6:30 we did a signing, and that was pretty much sold out. There was a bookstore from San Diego that was like the vendor for us, that they show up and they sell the books on our behalf, I guess. And they sold out in advance, and then the whole hour we were just meeting with people. The fun part is, I have to say, it's really cool to be in this position. It's such a privilege. People show up and they want to meet you, and we were lucky enough to be able to take the time to talk to everybody that came through for at least a couple of minutes if they wanted to. And some were, young kids and old fans and whatever. I mean, it was a blast. We had such a great time.
And it was very satisfying. Like they had a fairly big room for us. I mean, I don't know how many seats that it looked like about 400 or 500 seats.
You know how they do it? It's similar to other conventions where the convention halls or the convention meeting rooms have these partitions, and they can take them out, right? So we were in room 23 ABC, which means that we really had three rooms that they knocked the partition out of.
Oh wow!
So I don't know how many. I mean, but it wasn't like Hall H or anything, which is ginormous. We had I would say 300 seats or something like that in there. It was like the size of a good sized movie theater. And the way it works now at Comic-Con, which is different in years past that I've been there, they don't clear the room after one panel ends, right? They used to come, and so now you can squat and wait there. If there's a panel later in the day that you really want to go to, but you're worried that you might not make it, you can go earlier to a different one in the same room and just squat there in your seat. And I think that's what people did, because apparently about 100 people who wanted to join our panel were turned away, which sucks for them, but it's also kind of just, it makes me feel both good and bad. Bad for them, but good that so many people were interested in hearing what we had to say. And it was just fun. The whole day was just amazing. And then we got to hang out afterwards to have dinner with some of our friends who were there, which is also really nice. Yeah. So
I heard that you guys also had a film screening. Was it last night or the night before?
Yeah. There's so I live in Southern California in Los Angeles, and Ed, of course, lives in Chicago, but he's out here. So what I did was one thing that people may not realize about writing and publishing a book like this is that even though we're working with a pretty major publisher, a lot of the events that you have this window of time when a book comes out, 2 or 3 months maybe, or it's considered new, and that's the time when you might be able to get things like interviews to promote it. And also the fun part is to go out and speak about the book and sign books, sell books, that kind of thing. The window of time that you have to do that is relatively short. And the other thing is that the publishers don't necessarily have the resources to put you on a book tour. If I was Stephen King or James Patterson, maybe, but we're not. We're Steve Ryfle and Ed Godzishewski, who wrote a Godzilla book. So what I've learned, and I actually learned this when we did the Honda book. I had a friend at the time who was one of the editors of the LA Times book review section, and when that book was coming out, I met with her. Her name is Orly, and she's been a long time friend and colleague. And she said, "Look, if you want to go on a book tour, you're going to have to organize it yourself for what you're doing. I mean, these book publishers don't have a lot of resources, and what resources they have, they're going to devote to their biggest titles that sell the most, and that's understandable." So I learned on that title that you need to go out and make the connections and schedule your own screenings and talks and signings and all this stuff. And I learned how to do that. And so we're doing a lot of that this time. So a lot of the events that you might go out and see us at are things that we schedule, not the publisher. And that's no knock on them. They just, we're doing it for ourselves to the greatest extent we can. It's fun.
The screening that you guys did was for Ghidra, was it not?
Yeah. Long-winded answer, but to say, Frida Cinema in Southern California. I've done a bunch of events there, and Ed's done some of them with me over the years. We did a Honda, was it Godzilla 54?
No, that was Mothra.
Okay. So yeah, we did a film event there a couple of years ago and sold the Honda book. And last night they screened Ghidra and had us talk before and after it. And then if anybody lives in Southern California, check out the Frida Cinema in Santa Ana. It's really cool because not only do they have this eclectic schedule of films, the programming there is really good, but it's like a community theater. The people who hang out there and who go to the movies there are really nice, and they are supportive. And every time I've done something there, people hang out afterwards and want to talk to you and just chit chat about movies and stuff. I love it there.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's very much a cinema community center. Whereas, I live in LA and I love LA, but there's a million things to do in LA on any given night. So if you have an event here, good luck getting anybody to come out. Yeah. Unless, you got free beer and, you're giving away lottery tickets or something.
Or whatever else, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's just jump right into it. And it's a real simple question to start with, but how did this come about, this whole project?
Well, that thing?
This thing. Yeah. Just this little.
You might be familiar with it.
All 400 something pages of it.
Ed, go tell that story.
Okay. Well, this goes back to 2022, I think it is, or earlier.
It was before COVID, or during or before COVID.
Roughly about 3 years ago. Chris Mowry, who Steve had known from some previous contact, came to him with the idea, asking him if he was interested to write a book on Godzilla for the 70th anniversary. And I'm sure it took all of maybe 1 or 2 microseconds before Steve said, "Sure."
Yeah, that was the joke I told at G-Fest. It's like, are you freaking kidding?
And this is Toho asking, so it's not like it's something like any kind of independently funded book or something that we've had as our own idea. Not that we've never had that idea, but coming from the studio that makes Godzilla and being kind of officially sanctioned, that's a game changer, because that means they're coming to the table with resources for us as well.
Is that unprecedented? Has that ever happened before, to your knowledge?
Oh, for us, it is. I think.
Yeah. I don't know that Toho has ever done that with any other property.
I'm not aware. I mean, we worked on projects that were licensed before, like the classic media discs, for instance, and other discs where the film was licensed, above board, and then the special features that we were contracted to produce were vetted and all that. But this was different in that it was kind of like, well, first of all, it was directly from Toho to me, and then I immediately, thought, well, this isn't something I would necessarily want to do. Ed and I had already been working together for years on different things, but honestly, to be honest with you, I mean, one of the main reasons I wanted to do this was to do this with this guy, because this guy, I knew he would want to do it, but also knowing that from the very beginning that this probably meant that we would have access to images that, going back decades. Ed and I have both been working on content around Godzilla for decades now, and the challenge has always been the images, because Toho is very protective of its IP. So my first book, written in the late 90s, couldn't have any film stills in it because, and I didn't know that when I first started writing it. I thought, oh, well, we'll work it out, or the publisher will work it out. I had no idea, I was very naive in those days, but you learn over the years that this is a company, like a lot of companies, that's very protective of its IP. So, the challenge, and there have been other people who've written books, really good books, like David Callett's book, for instance, has no images in it. And just because it's been so difficult to license images and so expensive or whatnot. And here we are, suddenly, after all these years, presented with a situation where you finally can do something where you can marry the history of these films to the visual aspect of it that is so crucial to telling the story. And then this gentleman here is just so thoroughly knowledgeable about the image side of this and what's been published, what hasn't been published, and then, well, tell the story of the archive that we were given access to.
Well, I mean, maybe we should back up just a little bit first, because one of the real big challenge here that was presented to us is, like, when we started out, it was like about 3 years previous to the 70th anniversary, and we were thinking, oh, well, this is going to be great. We're going to have the time to do it right. But as it turned out, it took Toho and Abrams almost 2 years to negotiate their contract. So we didn't have any contract to work on until they were finished first. Once they finally got their contract, then it came to us. So it wasn't until I think it was March of 2023, a good year and a half to 2 years after we were first contacted on this, that we actually were offered a contract to do it. And over those 2 years, I mean, we're just waiting and waiting and waiting. And however, at least myself, I really had belief that this was going to happen. And of course, I was, maybe just because of my optimistic nature and something like that, I didn't want to wait. So I started doing a lot of research and picking out things out of my book collection that I thought, had promising information, getting things translated. Having my wife, who did yeoman's work on this, for translating for us. So I did a lot of prep work on it before we ever wound up getting the contract. And so we could kind of hit the ground running on the writing part, because we already had a lot of things done in advance. But then as soon as that contract was signed, Chris Mowry, who was the Toho guy at the time, arranged for us to get access to Toho's digital archive. And that was quite an amazing day that I finally got access to that, to see what they had available. Now, I will say that, their archive is probably far from complete, because I mean, even just from the numbering of the stills alone, you can tell they've shot maybe 2,000-3,000 photos for each title, but the archive had a varying amount of photos. Probably the King Kong versus Godzilla and Godzilla versus the Thing had the greatest number of images available, which would be like the 800-900 range, but most of them had only maybe between 100 and 300 images available. So it wasn't like we had this super complete archive to go after, but what was there was still really amazing. And of course, the other thing that's really nice is that they're all in really high quality. They were so crystal clear, like I've never seen on some of these photos. So that was just like, a real game changer for us, because now we had access to things that nobody's seen before, and that includes in Japan.
Well, that's the thing. Ed has such a vast collection of not only stills, but also Japanese books, for instance. And he has this kind of, I don't have an encyclopedic memory. And that's one of the reasons I became like a journalist and a writer, because I could write things down and it helps me remember things. But Ed remembers things, and he remembers whether or not he's seen a photo before, and if he did see it before, where, what book it was published in, or whatever, source it was published in. And so there was kind of a effort throughout this project to present photographs to a large extent that weren't shown or published before, at least not in the English language world. So you're not, because I mean, if you're a fan of this stuff and you've been following this for a while, you know that a lot of the pictures, a lot of stills were published again and again and again and again and again. I mean, how many times have you seen that picture of Godzilla? It's a great picture, but Godzilla with the train in its mouth, or my favorite, which is the one with, I think it has the maquette, Godzilla in the plains. It looks, the Godzilla looks like it's made out of clay, from the '54. So that I just knew as soon as this project was offered that I would never have been able to do it myself anyway. But I just knew that this guy would just be out of his mind to do it together. And we always do things better together anyway. That's the other thing. I agree. We always work. One of the reasons that we've been a partnership for so many years is because our interests are complementary, but not. They overlap in the right way, but there's also enough differentiation between our focus that we can complement one another rather than just do this. We don't just both do the same thing, and it's both within our abilities and our interests. So it was great to do this. I called this I think I wrote in the outro. I called it a capstone project, because I kind of think every time we do something, I think this has got to be probably the last big thing we're going to do together, because how can it get better than this? Like, how can it get better than writing a book about Honda, right? And then this comes along. So I still thought of this as a capstone, like a final or last hurrah kind of thing. But who knows, man? I mean, there's a possibility that we could do something else together that could be equally better. Equally good or better. So you never say never. But every time I do something, I think it's the last thing. That never is.
And in terms of images, I don't want to have this overlooked. We also got cooperation from other people. I mean, that was not only the Toho archive. Of course, I accessed all the photos that I've been accumulating for the last 50 years to fill in some of the holes. And then, of course, we had other people who helped us tremendously. And of course, as you know, our mutual friend Norman England in Japan, who's spent several years on the sets, had accumulated an incredible set photos from GMK, X Mechagodzilla, and also Tokusatsu to a lesser extent. And he graciously allowed us to use whatever we wanted to do, and I can't thank him enough. And of course, not only would he help us with photos, I mean, Norman was instrumental in doing a lot of things for us, opening doors, helping with either to set up interviews or to facilitate the interviews once they were being taken. So, I mean, thanks so much, Norman. We couldn't have done this without you, and I sincerely mean that. And additionally, other people in Japan, whether it was production people or other friends, everybody wanted to contribute to this. So it was really kind of like the sum total of a lot of different people's efforts, and we have great thanks to them all.
That's incredible. Wonderful. And speaking of the people that you've managed to work with, this book, of course, features a foreword from filmmaker, director John Carpenter, as well as Heisei Godzilla actress Megumi Odaka, who, for those who don't know, played Miki Sakusa throughout the Heisei era of the series. And we were just curious. Oh yeah, and as well as at the end of the book, you have an afterword by former Godzilla producer Shogo Tomiyama. Can you tell us a bit about how those collaborations came about, and what was it like working with them in terms of their contributions to your book?
Yeah, that's an interesting. It's an obvious question that people ask, and we had a foreword from Martin Scorsese for the Honda book a few years ago. People would say, or would ask, how the heck did you get Martin Scorsese to write the foreword for your book?" And the funny thing is, the answer is, "I just asked," and he said yes. It's really kind of simple, and as crazy as that sounds, or is unbelievable. For Scorsese a few years ago, I sent an email to Cicalia Productions, his office in New York, and explained what we were doing, and of course there was a history there between Scorsese and Honda, but and at the same time, so the seed for the John Carpenter foreword was planted when we did the Honda book, because I'd been contacting a number of people at that time to get blurbs for the back cover. A number of people who didn't, agree to do it, but John Carpenter gave us a blurb for the back cover of the Honda book, where he gave his tribute to Ishiro Honda. And I think, I can't remember exactly, but I think we had to edit it down because it didn't quite fit onto the back cover, but it was pretty long.
Yes.
So because he had written that wonderful tribute to Ishiro Honda some years ago, I went back this time, and we had a discussion with the publisher, because the publisher wants is a name person to write your forewords, because that's something they can publicize, and it's a selling point. So we threw out all these names, and and some of them were gettable, I thought, and some weren't. But I threw out John Carpenter, and they got really excited. And because I said, I'd had some contact with his office before. And the interesting, John Carpenter is an amazing filmmaker. One of the first times that I reached out to his office in 2016 or whatever it was for the Honda thing, he actually emailed back personally, not just his staff. I mean, he's a down-to-earth guy. He was really excited about that. So when I asked him if he would be interested in doing a foreword for the Honda book, he immediately said yes. And of course, having the previous history, I guess, helped a little bit. But yeah, that was pretty easy to get. And he did a great job. The Megumi Odaka thing is a more interesting story, and I guess I don't feel like there's any reason not to tell this story. I told it at G-Fest, but Ed will probably maybe have a chance to talk later about all the interviews that we did for this book. He really did all of them. I mean, I helped prepare for them, but Ed was the guy who was able to go to Japan to do these interviews in person. The original interviews that we did for this book. I did one in LA when Yamazaki came to LA, but anyway, what was I saying? Oh, the Odaka thing. So Megumi Odaka was one of the people who we approached for an interview the year or so before the book was being super, before we got super into the writing of the book. There was a preparation period, and she was one of the people that we had asked for an interview, and she had initially turned us down. And then both of us, I think, forgot about it because we moved on to other things. Last summer, what are we in 2025? Summer 2024, around the time that Monsterpalooza was happening in LA, which is, I guess, in July, a friend of mine named Oki Miyano, who's been really instrumental in so many projects we've done, asked me, he knew I was a baseball fan. He said, Megumi Odaka and her husband are coming to LA and they want to go to a Dodger game. Can you help us pick out tickets and buy tickets for the game? And I said, yeah, but can I go with you? That would be fun. I like the Dodgers and I like Megumi Odaka, and it'd be kind of just cool to do that. And he said, yeah, great. So I bought the tickets and we went to a Dodger. They wanted to see Shohei Ohtani, right? Because he's the king of Dodger baseball now. So they were staying at this hotel in Pasadena, which is right behind where the convention center where the Monsterpalooza is happening. I went like earlier in the day and said hello. She was signing stills and autographs and stuff. And her husband, Mr. Ugajin, was there. He's kind of like I guess her manager of some sort. Yeah. Anyway, I picked them up at the hotel, and Oki was there. The four of us went to the Dodger game, and I made a point of not being Mr. Fanboy that night, and we mostly just talked about baseball. And her husband is a big baseball fan, and we just chatted about baseball. I tried not to like say, "Hey, what was it like to work with Ken Pachiro or some damn thing like that." I just played it like try to be as non excited about it as I really was. And as the evening wore on, she got really. I think she became more comfortable just chatting with me, even though I didn't understand I don't speak Japanese, but I said like my 5 words of Japanese, and I think she assumed that I was fluent or something, because at one point she turned to me and she said, "Steve-san," and she launched into this like 5-minute discussion about something, and it was really funny and cute and hilarious because I had no idea what the hell she was talking about, but had been talking about sports all night. So Oki turned and kind of leaned into my ear and told me that she was talking about her high school gymnastics career and telling me all about it. Anyway, it was a great night. And as we were driving home in my car, Oki said, "Oh, by the way, Steve and his friend Ed are writing this Godzilla book that's supposed to come out with Toho next year." And it came out that, "Oh, yes, we got invited to an interview like that, but we turned it down." I blurted out, "Oh, yeah, that was me." I didn't really understand at the time that was kind of a faux pas, but it's just a spontaneous thing. And long story short, they said, "Oh, wow, this has been such a great night. We'd really love to be in the book somehow if we can make it work." And what it evolved into was the foreword, because at that point the book was basically written, more or less, and it was difficult to do like new interviews and squeeze them in. But somebody, we went back to our publisher and said, "Hey, she really wants to be in the book, and her husband wants her to be in the book, and they're all in now. We missed the opportunity earlier. Can we make this?" And somebody said it would be great to have a female voice, because so much of this genre is associated with male figures. And can she do a foreword? And we just worked it out. And what she contributed is amazing. Did you read it?
Mm-hmm.
It's personal. It's heartfelt. It's really autobiographical, and I love the way it worked out. I'm really grateful to her and to everybody who made it happen, because it's a really special piece of the book, I think.
No, it's a fantastic story.
Yeah.
What about getting Mr. Tomiyama's involvement for the afterward?
That was you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I had already interviewed, by that time I had already interviewed Tomiyama for the book, probably about 6 months earlier. And I think what we were just thinking was like, well, who could we get to do an afterword for the book? And especially given Tomiyama's position as kind of like the forerunner or the gatekeeper of all things Godzilla for quite a long time, and considering how articulate that he is and very thoughtful, his name kind of like jumped to the front. Like, well, why don't we ask him to do it? And yeah, I'm really pleased. He without hesitation agreed to do it.
No, I love that very much.
Yeah, that's very nice. I mean, one of the things about researching and writing this book, I mean, I learned a lot of new things, which is the point. And but I just came away. One of the things I came away with was a newfound understanding and appreciation of how important Tomiyama was, and how influential he was, and how instrumental he was in that second wave, or I guess it's the second wave of Godzilla popularity, and how calculated it was. It really was not much was left to chance, which is really interesting to see how they engineered these movies. And I knew that to a certain extent, but I didn't know it to the degree that we learned together. So that was
that's something that we really kind of want to dive into the nuts and bolts of this thing. And to start it off with, like the history of Godzilla films, I would say from Showa to Millennium is a pretty well trodden path, mostly trailblazed by you two, I would argue.
Yeah.
But what I enjoyed about the book was that you guys found new ways to add wrinkles to the story, new things to kind of spice things up a little bit. Like I wasn't reading the same old, same old. I was learning new things, new details and things like that. And I was wondering, like, did you guys find it challenging to uncover and include new things that you guys have been talking about for, to take your words, decades and decades?
Yes.
Well, I guess to some extent, it wasn't challenging in by nature the fact that there was just so much more that we hadn't found out yet, and so just about anything that I was picking up, practically every source had one or multiple bits of information that was eye-opening for us.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's challenging because we don't know where anything is. And you don't know what you don't know, but going into all these different documents or talking to people through our the original interviews, I mean, endlessly we're coming across things that surprised us, or things that I'd always would have wanted to know, but we weren't able to find out, and then boom, there they are. Sometimes I kind of felt like, going after certain sources in my book library, certain things I figured we're going to find some, this aspect that I want to find out about. But a lot of times it was just kind of like you're going in blind because you can't read it in advance. You have to translate it before you can really understand what you're getting.
That's the fun part. The question you're asking is really about. It really speaks to the fun part of this work for us. Neither one of us, I think, would ever be satisfied with just resting on our laurels, so to speak, and just regurgitating the same work that we've done before. The fun part is finding new information and searching for that information, finding it, and learning these new stories. Because we've talked about this all that. I still think even at this juncture, we've kind of we're scratching deeper into the surface, but we're still kind of scratching the surface. There's a lot of stuff that hasn't been, a lot of stories that still need to be told. It's harder and harder because people from the early generations are passing away. Fortunately, we and other people have interviewed a number of them. But there's still stories that we're finding that are new and interesting and weird and and the other thing too, I think I talked about this maybe with you at GFest. For me, as a writer, I don't want to write the same story. I don't like repeating myself. So that was a big challenge too. You asked about whether it was a challenge. So for instance, how many times has the story of the first film been written? How many times have people written a version of it where they talk about Tanaka flying over the ocean or Lucky Dragon incident? And those things are totally relevant, and you need to at least include them because this book is supposed to be for everyone. It's not just supposed to be for all the knowledgeable fans who know these things already, but it also is meant to reach out to the fans who aren't dyed in the wool or super steeped in knowledge yet, and get them interested in learning more and enjoying these movies on maybe a deeper level. It's hard to cast that wide of a net, and both retell and tell the existing history, but also add those new wrinkles that you're talking about. So for me, I struggled mightily with the first chapter because it had been done to death, the story of the first film, and just discovering. Because we mined a lot of new source material, or at least stuff that was new to us from Japan and Japanese sources, and reading a prominent Japanese critic's take on the first film that sort of ratified some of my thinking around the fact that it's not just about the fact that this monster is allegorically representative of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the arms race, but the film itself is essentially framed as a war movie. And it positions Japan and Tokyo on this war footing. And if you think of it that way, it kind of takes on a new and fresh, vantage point. So even that entry point into the first chapter was helpful to kind of get the thing rolling and to frame the whole. And also, I was looking for a framing device. and to look at that, the first film is a war film, and definitely -1 is a film about war, right? So it gives you like these bookends that you can kind of string the story together through, and then look for those common denominators in every film that you write about. And some of the times these themes will surface more strongly than others. But anyway, as a writer, I look for devices and motivations to do that. Maybe it's all bullshit, I don't know. But it might be, I don't know, but it's a way to kind of motivate me and make sense of these things, because you're writing about 70 freaking years of history, and you're trying to find common ground, and common through lines and this is a history that changes and evolves with the times and the economy and the sensibilities of the audience and all that stuff. But I don't know, I'm getting probably a little off point, but the fun of it for us is to find new stuff.
Yeah, and oddly enough, this quote that Steve was talking about from a Japanese was a historian, right?
It was a film critic.
Yeah, that came from a book that wasn't part of my research for this book. It was actually some other book that Steve was trying to get a little bit of information from for another project that he's working on, and just I remember I gave him some of these translations, said, here's some of the stuff for your political book project, and then boom, there buried in that, and unexpectedly was this
turned the key.
This quote that just like made everything click for him related to the first film.
It basically solved the problem that I was having. But you were asking about there's tidbits and there's nuggets and all kinds of new knowledge that we try to drop in this thing. And sometimes if it doesn't fit into the main, because there's a pattern or a kind of format for the narratives of each film chapter, but we utilize the big page format I like doing pull quotes and all that kind of stuff. To kind of add to the narrative and add details that may not fit into the main part of the story, but they're totally relevant. I'd never heard any quotes from the girls who were students at the school that was part of the Prayer for Peace scene. I mean, that was amazing stuff. I mean, and that's a level of detail that I had no idea that we would uncover, and that's just through Ed's mining the gold mines. Because the cliche I always say about Ed is he knows where the bodies are buried, and it's kind of this funny way of just expressing that he knows how to find these sources. And the other thing, like I'm sure you and a lot of the people watching out there, if you've ever gone through Japanese source material, even if you're using AI or some application to translate for you, you may find a book or some article or something, but how do you know if it's really useful? How do you know if it's relevant to what you're working on? You have to translate it. And a lot of the times, like all or very much of what you uncover is not useful. And so he is very good at kind of sussing that out and not leading us down rabbit holes that don't produce valuable information. And that's a skill, that I don't necessarily have as well as he does. So
very much so.
Yeah. Funny enough, we did have a question asking about what it was like to explore the sort of behind the scenes details, and what was it like to flesh out these stories, which you guys have gone into already. I'm definitely also curious what went into pretty much once you have all the information, all the resources at your disposal. What was it like, sort of like picking and choosing and prioritizing all these resources, and eventually like organizing them and formatting them the way you ultimately did for your book?
Yeah.
Well, we have a shared file that we set up for not only all the photos where we were going through photos, and I'd load a lot of things out there for selection and whittling down, but we also had this, what has turned out to be an enormous file of written information, whether it's the transcripts of the interviews we did, or all the various translations from different books. And that's just, and as I say, it's really enormous. Probably we have enough information that we didn't wind up being able to use to fill out another couple books. But to try and, to some extent at least, because it gets to be so much, it really kind of like makes it difficult to go in and figure out what are you going to use. So I went in for each film, I went into a lot of the information we had, and I prepared a document for each one called points of interest. And so I like pick either the quotes or the sections from all the different documents we had. I basically went through each one by one, and here's these, other 30 individual documents called points of interest. And when I saw something in there, I was like, oh, you know what? This is something we should do. And I copied into that file. And so I built point of interest files for each of the films and handed those over to Steve as he's writing the main narrative, to give him an idea that, like, well, here's what I think are things that are relevant. Maybe you don't want to use them all, but at least these are a lot of things that we should at least consider in some way, shape, or form using.
We always consider each other's opinions. And also we had a time when he came out to he lives in Chicago, I live in LA, and he came out for, I think it was a weekend or a week or something, and we just watched we speed watched a bunch of movies. I think at that point we were trying to just pinpoint some special effects things that we wanted to highlight. One of the things, though, when you write a book like this, you have to come up with a template for how you're going to handle each chapter and what types of information you're trying to convey. And one of the beauties of this kind of magazine-y format of a book, you can kind of, what we did was, if you look at it, like you pieced out certain pieces of the story and made sidebars or features out of them. So there's a whole feature about how Godzilla suits are made, and also because of the access to photos, we're able to show you, not just tell you how the suits were made in the classic days. There's a whole section on the special effects department structure. There's a section on monster suit acting, for instance. And so you don't have to, in the main narrative of each chapter, you don't necessarily have to get bogged down in the details of how something was done. So the main chapters on each film are, to my mind, largely about why certain things were done the way they were done. What the decision making, or like, the obstacles that the filmmakers had to face. Because I guess that's my interest, is the human story behind filmmaking is often about confronting challenges and obstacles and trying to make the film, despite things like budget reductions or, whatever the case may be, which the Godzilla series in particular is full of those kind of challenges, and that's really interesting to me. So, yeah, I mean, it's trying to, this book, the cliche I've been spouting at these different talks we've been doing is we tried to make the best possible book for the widest possible audience, knowing that some people are already really knowledgeable and they want to pick it up, but also that maybe the book can also appeal to some people who are really just kind of casually interested in this sort of thing, and give them the impetus to dive a little deeper and maybe enjoy it and appreciate the films a little bit more. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just in the interest of time here, I'm just looking at the time right now. We have just maybe about like 4 or 5 more questions. Would you guys be willing to stick around for maybe like another 20, 30 minutes, or would you like to wrap this up in 10 minutes?
We are at your disposal, Matt.
Excellent. Well, that makes me extraordinarily happy then. One of the things I wanted to bring up, because Ed, you went out to Japan to get all the interviews for this book, and I wanted to know what was the process of going through that, of gathering those, and when you were going out there, did you already have like a hit list of people that you absolutely knew you wanted to get? And did any pop up that surprised you, that just maybe at a spur of the moment kind of thing?
Well, pretty much I went in doing the interviews. I had a very clear picture of who I wanted to talk to, and by and large, for the most part, we were able to successfully at one time or another schedule them. But we were kind of under the gun, you know, considering that they were looking for a manuscript originally by like August or September, and we're starting in March. So it was like, you know, immediately got the contract signed. I scheduled my first trip without even having any of the interviews set up yet. I kind of got, you know, the first few set up while I was over there, which was
That's crazy.
a feat in and of itself.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had two subsequent trips, one in September and another one at basically the one in November turned out to be trying to was mainly centered around trying to get Yamazaki as well as Naoki Sato and maybe a couple other people from -1. But that turned out to be not very productive, because as much as we, you know, we're looking for getting -1 in the book, and this is before it wound up being a big hit, especially internationally, you know, that they, you know, Toho pretty much treated us just like the rest of the press. Like, you know, they wouldn't release any information until the very last moment. And even at that, you know, we were kind of relegated to the same pool of time as all the other press. So I remember clearly it was the day I was leaving Japan was when they finally agreed to give me 45 minutes with him. So I was practically, you know, 9 toes out the door before I was able to speak with him. But fortunately I did, and I'm glad that I did, because I wound up getting a lot of really good information from him. It was just after he had returned from the U.S. and he you know, gave us information that kind of surprised me, how he never really expected that film to be successful internationally. And you know, that was, I thought, one of the more interesting things that came out of his interview. But trying to set things up, you know, the first trip was basically, you know, using people that I had already talked to previously, and using you know, contact information that we either had left over from many years ago, or in some cases Norman helped us out with contacting people. Arranged the first few on my first trip, but on the second time that I was going, just really it was just like a day or two before leaving, I just, you know, had like an epiphany, like the production manager who helped us so tremendously, Joko Mikuzani, in Japan. She helped us so much in doing our documentary film, and she was the one who really helped track down a lot of people and set things up. And so I just reached out to her and asked her if she could help me to arrange interviews. And within a couple of days, boom, 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 she knocked off like 6 or 7 people off the list. And we were able to make that, especially my second trip in September, be extremely productive. And she also helped either translating herself or arranging for us to have you know, other translators to do the job for us, so that at least I wouldn't be sitting in on these interviews and going in blind. And you know, for the most part, we got most everybody we were hoping to get. Shinji Higuchi wasn't available because he was working at that time, I think, on Shin. I don't know. I think it's Shin Ultraman he was working on at that time. But anyway, either that or Shin Kamen Rider he was working on. So he wasn't available. We only had a couple people who turned us down. Mikoto Daka turned us down when I was there, and we asked her, and you know, Masaki Tezuka for some reason turned us down. I never really got a clear reason why, but other than that, I think we succeeded in being able to talk to just about everybody who was on the list.
And we had, of course, both of us have done interviews previously for other projects, so we kind of tapped into those interviews. Yeah. I also think we tapped into a little plug here for Kaiju Masterclass. which is a project that we were involved in a couple of years ago. It was an online convention during COVID for 2 years, and there were some amazing interviews that were done there. By the way, everybody go to Kaiju Masterclass on YouTube and watch those videos. They're really good. Long form interviews with Japanese creators of these films. So there's a lot of resources that we had, but the original stuff that Ed did for this project was really key. There were, interviews that were related to Godzilla versus Megaguirus, for instance. There's a lot of new material. These things that I never knew before. So it was, worthwhile to have that availability or that ability to do that. I have to say, not to toot my own horn, but I negotiated a really awesome contract for us for this project, including that because I don't want to go into it, but I did it. I stood our ground on a couple of things, and one of them was to provide resources that Ed could go to Japan and do those interviews, because we didn't want to just do another a hack job kind of thing. Again, we don't like to rest on our laurels, so I was able to get us some resources that allowed for us to do some new original research, including those interviews.
No, that's excellent. Andres, do you want to jump to question 8 since they already kind of answered question 7?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So, on top of the interviews, on top of, collaborating with the individuals that provided the, forwards and afterwards, your book also happens to feature these wonderful side pieces with guest writers like Eric Hominick, who runs akirafukube.org, who offers a look at the sort of the broad strokes of Ifukube's music. We had our friend Norman England, author of Behind the Kaiju Curtain, writing about set photographer Takashi Nakao. When it came to these further collaborations with these guest writers in particular, was this an aspect that was planned from the beginning, or was this an idea that came about during the development process of the book?
Well, at least as far as the article that Norman provided to us on Takashi Nakao, honestly, that was something that from the start, I thought, like, if this is going to be as big a visual book as they are going to allow us to make, that was something that came to my mind right away. Is like, I know Norman spent an entire summer with Nakao on the set of GMK, and I thought, well, who better to get something written about than the guy who took all the photos that are in the book?
Yeah,
I mean, not all of them, but he took a vast majority of the Showa and Heisei films, and even the first couple Millennium films. I mean, that photography is a key element of this book, and one of the things that makes it so attractive. Yeah. So to be able to pay some kind of tribute to the man who did all that photography, I really thought that would be a great thing to do, and information on him as a person was very difficult to come by. So I thought, okay, why not ask Norman to do that? Because, he spent so much time with him. He's probably in a position to do that, unlike almost anyone else. I mean, honestly, I definitely asked around in Japan for other people who might have something to say about him, trying to dig up other people who could comment on his work, but nobody really seemed to know him. I mean, I know Satsuma did know him very well. I think they were very good friends, but Satsuma also was a person who was unavailable, and as it turned out, it was because he had a lot of health issues, which, of course, as we found out, about a year ago, that wound up taking his life. But at that time, everybody was wondering what was going on with Satsuma. That was something that many people asked us about when we were conducting the interviews.
The other piece that you mentioned is in chapter 1. It's a sidebar on the music of the score of the first film by Akira Ifukube, and that's written by Eric Hominick, who is a longtime friend and colleague, and who is both a scholar. He's teaching at UC San Diego, but he's writing a monograph about Akira Ifukube. which is sort of, to my understanding, sort of both biographical and sort of polemical or argumentative. It sounds like it's going to be a really interesting project, and my understanding it's coming out probably next year. So look for that in book form. But I mean, he's the expert on Ifukube in both terms of his music and the agenda of his music. And Ifukube's music is so weird and different, and to try to write about it is difficult for anybody, I think, because a Western writer is going to apply Western standards. You're going to compare it to Western music, and that's kind of inappropriate and just off base. And I was talking to Eric about this recently. One of the terms that would come up repeatedly in writing about Ifukube's music was the fact that he uses like a 12-tone scale, but he doesn't write 12-tone music like Schoenberg. It's music that uses chromatic motion and chromatic movements, but it's not, to my mind, like a true 12-tone type of music that, in the way that it's traditionally thought of. Anyway, long story short, I mean, who better to write a piece explaining, Ifukube's approach and the history of that score for the first film, which sets in motion and lays the groundwork for this music that's entirely integral to the whole genre and to the whole history of Godzilla. I mean, they're still using it 70 years later, 69 years later, in -1 and Shin Godzilla and all this stuff. So we asked Eric to write that piece, and we were very fortunate that he was willing to do that. I think it's a great piece of the book. There's all kinds of things, like there's not a lot of interview pieces in the book. There's one Q&A with Kaneko, and there's Shusuke Kaneko about GMK, which is we chose to do that because that's such a interesting movie, and kind of, in that cycle of kind of standalone movies in the Millennium series, that one I think stands apart. Everyone kind of understands that that's really ambitious, and it's sort of really kind of a standout movie in that time period. And then, of course, the Yamazaki Q&A is great because it's about one of the most game-changing movies in the entire Godzilla series, and gives his perspective on how he portrayed the movie. And also, I don't know if this was part of our thinking, but there's a synergy between those two movies in that Yamazaki really admires GMK, and there's a lot of similar ideas in the two. So that was really nice to have. But yeah, throughout the whole book, as you pointed out, we kind of take these breakout sections to dive into something a little deeper, whether it's the special effects or something like the transition or layoff period when Godzilla was off screen between like 76 to 83 or 75 to 84, that type of thing. We use the format. The idea is that you could, depending on which Godzilla movie you happen to be watching that night, you could open the book to that and just read from there. You don't have to start from the beginning and read to the end. If you want to, that's great, because I think there's a through line, but you don't have to. You can handle it any way you want.
Just to expand upon that point just a little bit, Steve, I wanted to point that out, is that there is a through line through here. And that's what I found really exciting about the book, was all the stuff that was talked about that wasn't necessarily happening on screen, but the stuff in between. It feels like sometimes, so many times, people think that these movies just kind of pop up out of nowhere, that there was no outside forces that affected them one way or the other. But to be able to see the before and then the after, and then the large swaths of time where we didn't really know what was going on, and actually knowing what was going on, whether it was within the realm of merchandising, or if it was like in the 80s with the Godzilla Revival Committee. Like, that's something I really appreciated that you guys did, where you left no stone unturned. Every decade, every moment, we knew what was going on. There wasn't just a kind of a blank period where people were like, oh, well, I guess nothing was happening. And that's something that I really appreciate about the book specifically.
I think you're picking up on something important, and I'm glad you did, and thank you for mentioning it. I guess if there's a through line or a theme from beginning to end, it's about the external and internal forces and that affected or guided this character, this monster, this series from beginning to where we are now. And I find that stuff really interesting, because Godzilla is not a person. It's a fictional character or a fictional thing that at times has behaved as a character and times not, but it's always kind of guided both by the people and their agenda, the creative people making the movie at that particular time, but also by external factors that are really interesting to us, I think. So it was fun to discover the similarities between the typhoon at the beginning of Mothra versus Godzilla and the actual typhoon that hit that same area of Nagoya a few years earlier, and to see pictures, news photographs of the pumps that they used to pump the water out of the bay of the Nagoya Bay that looked exactly like the miniature pumps in the movie at the beginning, which I always found fascinating. I didn't think that was something, I thought it was just imagination, but it's actually based on how they actually got the water out of that area that had been flooded. Things like the assassination plot in China that strongly resembles the assassination plot that happens at the beginning of Ghidra. I love discovering that stuff and just kind of connecting those dots. It's really fun. Yeah.
No, it's awesome. This book, it really does feel like the definitive Godzilla tome in the English language, and also kind of the creative apex of both your guys' career. I think it was Patrick Galvin in his review that said that it felt like a combination of Japan's favorite Monstar written by you, Steve, and the Illustrated Encyclopedia of Godzilla written by you, Ed.
That's great.
Yeah. And this is more of a personal question, but what does this project mean to each of you individually on a deeper level?
Yeah.
Well, honestly, it's the dream project. It's the thing that probably my entire life, if you would have asked me even 50 years ago, what would you like to do? This is exactly what I would have wanted to do. I mean, something that's image rich, that's going to allow us to not just print images, but print them in a very large format so that, the readers can pick it up and look at it and enjoy all the rich detail that these photographs present, and to get deeply into the information and being able to present the really hard work of all the individuals who worked on these films and tell their stories and give them, it's long overdue, all that kind of thing. That's everything in that this book contains is the kind of thing I would have wanted to do even from the start. So it truly is, for me, the dream project. And
you knocked it out of the park.
I mean, I certainly hope that there's,
as they say,
something coming beyond this, but who knows? But right now, I'd say this is a pretty good, cherry on top of the ice cream for us.
Yeah. You asked what it means to us personally. Did either of you see the Honda documentary when it screened at G-Fest, or have you seen it elsewhere?
Not as of yet, no.
Okay. Well, I'm going to reveal the sensitive side of myself. There's if anybody has seen it, and I hope that it'll be distributed more widely, but there's a scene in the movie that was an interview, it's a segment of the interview that the filmmaker did with me. And I, at the time, didn't think that it would make it to the final cut, but realizing later now that when someone becomes emotional, that is filmmaker's gold, and so that's going to be part of the movie. So the filmmaker asked me a question about, I think he asked me to retell or recount the story of Honda's return home from the war. And I started telling it as it's, I guess, summarizing the way it's written in the book. But I started to remember as I was telling this story, Kimi Honda telling the story to us. And I became kind of choked up because the story is very emotional. It's a story about her husband who had been away at the war front for several years and whom she didn't know. She had no idea if he had ever returned. She had no idea if he was alive or dead at that point. And this is, several months or, half a year after the war ended, and, the repatriation of the Japanese soldiers from China and from the colonial, the islands it took months. And so he finally makes it home. And of course, he's malnourished and he's sick and he's kind of this scrawny dude and fatigues. And he shows up at the door, and and the baby is crawling in the living room, and the baby crawls, the baby Ryuji, the son, crawls to the door and starts crying because he doesn't even recognize his father. He doesn't even know who he is. He's an infant. And the whole story of her greeting him, and I don't know, it's more than the emotion of the story. It was the emotion of remembering her telling the story and being emotional, and the tremendous trust. This is what gets me, okay? The tremendous trust that has been placed in us by both the Honda family, people like Yasuyuki Inouye, who invited us into his home and workshop, and we told his story through the film that we made, almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And in this case, the tremendous trust that Toho placed in us. I know that it's a corporation, right? And you can think of that, they're just creating another product, but again, this is something. Godzilla and this whole genre is something that means a tremendous amount to us because it's been a big part of our lives, and we've spent a good chunk of our lives, together and independently studying this stuff. So, what it means to me personally is something very meaningful because it just speaks to the tremendous trust that has been placed in us together and individually to tell a major part of the story of this character that we love, and then collectively within that, there's all these people who are part of that story, who also invited us into their lives and gave us their time and shared their memories and all that. It's powerful, man. When you grew up loving this stuff, and then to have that happen to you, because this isn't our careers, although we're approaching it professionally, it is it's really a passion project and a labor of love. To be able to do it, to be able to be trusted that well, and to have the end product be the book that you just held up, is something that we're really proud of this and humbled by the fact that we could actually do it. Yeah, I think.
Well said.
Yeah, I mean, you asked a really interesting question. I thank you for asking it because it's really meaningful to us. Can I answer one of the questions that came up in the?
Yes, absolutely.
Sure, go right ahead.
I think it was before, but somebody asked why the monster verse isn't in this book.
Mm-hmm.
The title or the subtitle of the book is The Official Illustrated History of the Japanese Productions. It's a book that a business decision was made, not by us, but by the powers that be, to write a book or to create a book about specifically the Japanese productions. That includes both the live action productions and the anime productions. And so that's what it's about. There are other books that are really good about and certainly and so that means not only the MonsterVerse stuff isn't in this, but also the TriStar stuff, the TriStar film. But there are books about those films, and they're really good. And if you're interested in those, you should go check them out. But this was an opportunity for Toho, I think, to just really focus in on their stuff and have something that showcases their work to the Western world. And who knows, maybe there'll be a Japanese edition of it someday. That would be really cool.
It'd be incredible.
Yeah.
Andres, do you want to go with question 10?
Absolutely. So a big question is, you mentioned at the very beginning that, every project that you've tackled has felt like this might be the last one. So
we're old parts, man.
Yeah.
Matt did a video a couple of years ago about the old guard or whatever we are.
I didn't call you guys the old guard. We were. That's a whole nother subject. Andre, please continue.
The old guard starts with old, Matt. But you were asking a legitimate question. I don't mean to interrupt, but it was
no, it's perfectly fine.
Who's gonna carry the torch or something?
Oh, it was basically like Well, first off, is there anything that you didn't get to explore in this book that you'd still like to tackle? And if so, do you feel like there may be a chance there's still that bit of creative drive in you to want to do something else in the future? What is the likelihood of you guys potentially doing more, whether it's another book, an article, a commentary, or presentations at a screening, a convention, or another type of event or gathering? Is there still more? Do you happen to see more work like this in the future for you guys in some way, shape, or form?
No, that's it, man. We're done. No, I mean, we're doing I guess what you could call a book tour right now. I mean, we have another
Mhm.
event tomorrow night here in LA, and and we always, periodically get invited to do things here and there. Ed has an idea for another project that we might explore. I have a book called Godzilla versus the World that I'm actually under contract to finish, and I need to finish that. I've written most of it, but not all of it, and that's a totally different kind of thing. It's kind of an experiment for me. It's there's been a lot more writing in recent years about the political history of these films, but anyway, it's different than anything I've ever done, and I'm hoping to finish that soon. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, who knows? We always, he's much more like optimistic about it. He even told you like I didn't even think this book was going to happen. So at one point, I just sort of mentally checked out because the publisher wasn't giving us any updates at that point, and they were locked in these long, protracted contract negotiations, I guess, with Toho, and it just took a long time. But I just assumed, no, there's no way it's happening. So I moved on. But this guy kept working on it and preparing, so that when we did have it, they did come back to us and said, yeah, we still want that book, but we, instead of having 2.5 years, now you've got 6 months to write it, but we want the same book that you offered us 2.5 years or 3 years ago. Anyway, but yeah, because this guy had been prepping for the previous year or so, we were able to hit the ground running. But do you want to talk about your ideas for other things that we might work on, or is it a little premature?
I think it's probably premature, but I think as far as anything in the future, I mean, well, speaking at events is something we can do almost any time. It's just a matter of being asked. But I think when it comes to like other things, like whether it be a book or a commentary or whatever kind of thing of that nature, that's really dependent in large part on whoever's going to provide that content, and whether there's going to be a film that we can do a commentary on that a releasing company would even be interested in doing to begin with, or if a publisher would be interested in XYZ book. That's really the key for us, being able to produce at least some kind of major work. I mean, we can always, work on, smaller stuff on our own, but I mean, especially something of this nature, it's really not possible to do by yourselves. You have to have the cooperation of, a publisher and, in the ideal case, also the studio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is a major project. I hope it shows. It involved a lot of people whom we should thank. I mean, Connor Leonard was our editor at Abrams. We had that's the thing. There's a whole team of people and they're credited in I guess the masthead or credit section of the book. But the designers that worked on this, they labored intensely. That's the thing. I think you asked us this at G-Fest, or at least we talked about it. I know this book, because of the compressed production schedule, the publisher and Toho, the whole idea was to get it out during the 70th anniversary year. I think originally they would have liked to have had it out by like November of last year when Godzilla turned 70, but for many reasons it didn't happen. But they were it was imperative to get it out during the 70th year before Godzilla turned 71. Okay, so that was a big thing. And so the timeline was really accelerated in terms of actually writing the manuscript. I've never worked like that. But and you know, we both had full-time jobs during the day to actually, you know, pay for food and stuff that you need. Um, so this is, you know, again, a passion project. It's not like something you quit your job to do, because it's not like that. It doesn't work like that. But you know, you approach it in the most professional way. But there was like, you know, so was an production, essentially a project manager or production supervisor type of person named Jan Hughes, who was amazing, and really like whipped me into shape in particular. And I think I told her, I think I gave you a heart attack, but no, she was great in the end to work with, because she got this thing over the finish line on time and made sure that it could get out for the spring release. These publishers have, you know, I guess they release their books on a calendar schedule, like season by season. So we had to get out by spring of 25. Jan, Connor, Leonard, there were all these, you know, Susie and all the different people who worked behind the scenes to design the thing. You know, we were turning in chapters and they were designing the book as we turned in chapter by chapter by chapter, laying it out. And because there wasn't enough time to like write an entire manuscript and then design it. It had to be designed on the fly, and then you revise the text as you go. You know, we got all the work done that you would normally do at the various stages of a production like this. But you know, and I hope I'm not giving away trade or production secrets, but it's just really an interesting and totally stressful way to work. but it came out great.
Tell them your little metaphor for that.
The old, you know,
airplane.
yeah, the old dumb cliche, you're building the plane while you fly it. It was kind of like that. Yeah.
For the final question, I feel like this could be a whole episode by itself, but just to really sum it up, you know, I think there's always going to be a section of people, of fans, that are always going to be interested in how these films were made, the people behind them, the stories that are behind them. And you guys certainly have quite the pedigree when it comes to this. Do you have any advice for future researchers, writers, content creators who are basically essentially following in your guys' footsteps?
Well, my first bit of advice is do your own research. Don't just rely on things that people have, you know, already dug up. I mean, that's fine to use that as a base to start from, but and I know it's not easy, because we're talking about language as well as, you know, just the fact that, you know, everything is happening a half a world away. But you know, if you really, really want to do the kind of things that we've been able to do, you have to, you know, make the effort and build the context to do your own research, whether that's learning Japanese or hiring a translator, you know, obtaining books, trying to get contacts in the industry. I mean, I was nobody back at the time that I first made my first contacts in Japan. I mean, basically, you know, a friend of mine, Bill Goodmanson in Chicago, he, you know, gave me the address of somebody that he, you know, had been writing to in Japan, and that person passed me over to somebody else. And something as innocent as that is what started my, you know, eventual network of friends and contacts in Japan to get things done. And if you don't try, you're never going to be able to do it. I mean, it won't be easy, but that's, I think, if you really want to be successful and do something special, you have to do your own and not just rely on things that have already been done.
Yeah, I mean, that's really well said and important. I would only add, focus on the human side of it. And that's not just applies to writing about Japanese science fiction and fantasy films, but if you wanted, I don't know, tell the story of anyone's life, or, you know, the making of a film or whatever, these are the thing that I'm continually reminded of when we write about Godzilla or this genre or anything related to it, is these are human beings who made these movies, and they're really passionate about their work, and you know, it was their life and their craft. And I really enjoy, you know, learning about the way they did things, but more than that, why they did it, and the circumstances under which they had to do it, the challenges that they faced, the obstacles they overcame. Those are human stories, you know. And so if you just are able to connect with people, like Ed said, if you can ever, instead of just regurgitating things that have already been written, if you make the human contacts, and you know, it's gotten a lot easier, I think, over the years. I mean, wow, you can be Facebook friends with like Godzilla suit actors now, and directors of these films, and people like directly involved with them. You can go to conventions and meet these people. And if you're serious about it, you know, you can build those relationships if you're sincere. So, I don't know, just find the human stories in this world, because I think that's where it's at, you know. And that's where the drama is. That's where the humanity is. That's what I like about it.
No, it's a fantastic answer. And I truly thank you both, not only for, again, just the incredible work. Again, guys, the book is Godzilla, the First 70 Years, over 400 pages of just incredible stuff for you guys to check out, available on Amazon.com and all other major book resellers. But no, Stephen, I'd really would just like to thank you guys for taking the time today just to come in here and just talking so extensively about this. You guys are going to be hearing it from a lot of people. There's people in the chat that have said it, but it's been pretty incredible. So thank you.
You've always been really supportive, Matt. So,
yes,
you know, we always dig, you know, talking to you and everything, but, you know, just thanks for the support. It's really cool.
100%. Yeah. 100%. Yeah, we'll go ahead and wrap it up here. Just to, again, don't want to take up too much of your guys' time, but Andres, is there any last final thoughts you'd like to give?
Sure. You know, I like ever since 2006, you know, when Classic Media was putting out the Toho Master Collection, I've always been a fan of your guys' work. Whether it was through the commentaries, the articles, the interviews, the books. You guys have truly been an inspiration for me and my closest friends within this community. You know, you've shed so much light on this franchise that we all love. You know, you've talked about giving showcasing the human side of these movies, that these are not just fictional characters duking it out on screen. These were people with a dream, with a vision, with passion that they brought to life with their own blood, sweat, and tears. And you guys pretty much made it possible for us here in the West to learn about, to appreciate the people behind these movies, to put a face on a voice essentially on these people that created the things that we loved. And I definitely want to say thank you so much for everything that you have done, everything that you've contributed. And, you know, this book of this latest, you know, project of yours just feels like the culmination of all of that stuff. And, you know, you've even inspired Matt and I, because, you know, here we are just doing our own commentaries.
Way to plug, Andres.
But it's like we genuinely, when we were working on those commentaries for the upcoming Kamen Rider release, we looked to you guys as role models. You guys set the bar so high, and we said, you know, we want to do nothing but to live up to the standards that you guys have set, you know, way back when, and continue to uphold to this very day. So it's just, I can't even imagine, you know, many years, like almost 20 years ago, thinking that I'd be one day talking and interviewing you guys, and then in a way sort of following in your footsteps in a loose sort of sense. So I just got to say, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for everything.
Well, you know, we're just a couple of regular jerks, right? No, thanks that's really kind of you. We both appreciate that. Yeah, no, I mean, we're privileged to do this. We love these movies. We love Godzilla. We love the whole, I mean, we love cinema, basically. I mean, Godzilla is part of cinema. It's a small part of it, but it's a big part of it at the same time. And to have this role, you know, to tell this story, I mean, yeah, the word I keep coming back to is it's a real privilege. I also wanted to thank all the people on the chat who've been saying hello and offering little questions and stuff. I hope we answered some of them. But thanks for tuning in. That was really cool to see your names and your questions out there.
Yes, thank you all for coming in and supporting this. It's incredibly awesome, and we're hoping that this will not be the only time that we do this. Andres and I are planning a whole series of this stuff. And once again, Ed and Steve, thank you again so much. And everybody in the chat, go buy the book.
And review it.
Yeah, and review it. It's worth every penny.
Go to Amazon.
Yeah, the word.
we would appreciate comment, the reviews on Amazon,
especially if you like it.
Good, bad, or indifferent, whatever it is. We want to hear people's feedback, and we'd like, it's as authors, it's also something that's very satisfying when you get to see the feedback and understand whether people liked it, didn't like it, or whatever. We want to hear that. We appreciate feedback.
Yeah.
We did have a couple of comments in the chat that were like that. I didn't have them starred. Here, my buddy Helm said, "I don't want the book to end." For one,
is that
another 400 pages?
I'm pretty sure that's Jim. Jim, I see you. I see you. I see you out there. Wow. I know who that is.
There have been other people just saying how much they have really enjoyed this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love your written articles of Godzilla and other kaiju of Toho. Can't recommend Godzilla the first 70 years enough. It's an amazing book. If Godzilla attacks, you can use it to knock him out with it.
This is entirely off topic, but right before we started, I was making dinner, and neither one of us have eaten today. And I put on a pot of curry rice, and it's just filled the house. It's simmering as we're talking, right? It's like 9 o'clock here, and it's like the whole house smells like food now. It's amazing. So as soon as we get off here, we're gonna just
go get something. Yeah, go pig out. Go get something to eat. Thank you again so much, guys, and thank you to all of you. We will see you next time. Go buy the book. Ed and Steve, thank you again so much.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, guys.